Spinning. Hi, everyone. Anne O'Connell with OC Publishing here, and welcome to the Author Journey. We come to you live every week on Tuesday afternoons at 4 p.m. Atlantic, and we have a grand old time talking to authors, to publishers, and today we have the great pleasure of talking to somebody who is both. So I'm going to bring up in a minute my fellow author publisher, also fellow Haligonian, right here in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Aren A. Morris, who is an author recently released this We Happy Few, which is, it's very timely that we're talking about this because we just had Remembrance Day a couple of days ago. And this particular novel is set in World War I, VE Day, when, and focuses on a group of women who worked at the Halifax to bring Aren up to share that with you. But she also is the co-founder of Black Box Publishing here in Halifax. So I'm going to let her share a little bit more about that as we chat. Welcome, Aren, to the Author Journey. Yay! It's so great to have
Thanks
you.
For having me.
It's my pleasure.
Happy to be here.
We had quite a chat before we came on, and I'm like, okay, we have to save that for when everybody else is listening. And we're having some technical difficulties, so hopefully we'll be able to get through this all as folks come and join us. So welcome to the Author Journey, Aren.
Thanks.
Yay.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. And, you know, I'm used to wearing alternate hats between author and publisher, but mostly lately have been more publisher than author. But let's talk first about this amazing book that came out.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about We Happy Few and how that came about.
Sure. So We Happy Few was released in May 2022. It's my first novel. I'm working on my second now. It was a pretty long project that first time. I often say, like, I was teaching myself to write a book, because until you've written a book, you don't know how to write a book. And
Right.
so I was, learning that process. It was honestly a 4-year process this first time around. So I have a full-time job. I work in education, and I took a brief leave of absence, a deferred leave for half a year, and wrote the first draft. And then I picked away at it bit by bit, different drafts, beta readers, things like that. And then last fall had another deferred leave where we went into production, and then it was released in the spring. And so there was, pretty large periods of time in between where I was sort of doing other things. So I have a family, and I'm pretty involved in my community and things like that. So it was, there was a lot of downtime in between. I'm hoping with the second novel that things go a little more quickly rather than 4 years. And also I think I understand the process a bit better this time around. But what was exciting with We Happy Few is, like, We Happy Few was our test ground as Black Box Publishing. So we decided to publish my novel as a testing ground for Heather and I. Heather's my co-publisher at Black Box. It was our testing ground, right, to figure out what are we doing? How do we do it? What is our ethos as a company? What's important to us? What are we interested in? And to be honest, we didn't set out to create a company. We just enjoyed working together so much that we thought, because Heather was originally my editor on We Happy Few. And nice. So I had just sort of hired her independently and said, like, could you have a look? Could you give me some really honest feedback?
Yeah.
And we just had so much fun working together that we didn't want it to stop. And so Heather said, what if we published it? And what if we made a company? And it sort of snowballed from there. And so it was exciting. I had no intention of creating a publishing company.
I can relate to that. And it's funny because you talk about that relationship with your editor, and on previous shows, I've had editors come on and chat about that process. And of course I work very closely, with editors and designers. And it really is, you have to find that marriage almost And when you find one that works, you don't want to let them go, right? And I want to give a shout out
Totally.
to the folks who are watching. Hi, Sue Slade, Dartmouth Book Exchange, and
Hi,
Lana Sheep,
Sue.
our author friend.
Oh,
Yeah,
hi,
and
Lena.
Cindy Tingley, also author. So there's all kinds of
Amazing.
bookly people who are watching today. And don't forget,
Very cool.
everyone, if you have questions for Aren or myself as we're chatting. Oh, Janice Landry, hi. Yay. Janice, we'll have to get Janice back on sometime on the
Janice just
author
had a book
journey.
release as well, I think, right?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. She's just
Yeah.
on her book tour now, and I'm hoping to get out and see Janice at one of her signings coming up. And I think on Friday, Janice, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, you'll be at Scotia Square, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, everybody get out and see Janice Landry and have a look at her new book. So, Aren, we're trying to cover so much ground here. So I hope you'll come back another
Of
time. But
course. Of course.
talk a little bit about this book. We Happy Few, as I said, it's in Halifax,
Mhm.
set during VA Day or VE Day, which is
Mhm.
uh,
Yep.
tell us a little bit about
Sure.
why you chose that time in history and
Sure.
how that main character came to be.
So I think the interest for me started with when I discovered there was riots during VE Day here in Halifax, and that was just very surprising for me. I was really shocked by that. I couldn't imagine that in our city, in our friendly little harbor town. And so I started reading about it and researching it, and I was just amazed with that sort of like little historical nugget. And then from there, Polly kind of snowballed into a character. I was really interested in her, but the truth is that this started out as a play. So I have a theater background. I work in
Right.
theater education. That's a big part of how I pay my bills. And I thought this would be so cool. Like, this would be such a great play. And what happened was I couldn't contain it
Mm-hmm.
in like a 45-minute one act play. There's just so much ground.
Right.
Um, and so I kept fiddling with it and trying to rewrite it and for on and off for a couple of years. And it was just like my own little side project for myself that I was working on. And then as I was heading into this deferred leave, I realized, oh, this is a
Oh, you
book.
froze.
Oh,
Okay, can you
yeah,
repeat that? You froze
am I
up a
okay
little
now?
bit.
Sure.
You're there now. Oh,
Yeah,
Janice says my grandfather had to board his grocery store up so it wasn't destroyed in the riot. So,
totally. Yeah.
the experience was
Yeah.
pretty traumatic for a lot of folks.
It was yeah, when I started researching and hearing stories just like that, right, and hearing comments like that, I was, on a quick side note, I was able to, spend some time at, in the nursing archive at Victoria General, and, one of the women there that runs that little museum was a child during the VE Day riots. And so she was sharing stories with me. That was just a happy coincidence. I didn't know that. I wasn't there for that purpose. I was there for research about the hospital. But and she was
Wow.
telling me wild stories like that, that there was like a sense of fear, but there was also this sense of like excitement because nothing had ever happened like that before. So um, before I froze, I think I was saying that the intention was for it to be a play, and it just wasn't working.
Mhm.
And so as I got close to my deferred leave, I realized, oh, this is a book, and I don't know how to write a book. What do I, well, how could I write a book? And so then I sort of set off on the adventure of trying to figure out teaching myself, to write a book and that's part of why it took so long. I was doing it part-time and in my spare time and trying to teach myself how to write a book and I think that theater background certainly served me well because when we're creating for theater, we're talking a lot about character motivation and why does a character do what they do and staying true to that and developing a world and things like that. So I definitely see how that served me. I also did a master's with a thesis component, and so I could see how that really helped me with my research, like doing all the research and then turning it into writing and things like that. So that's kind of where We Happy Few came from. In addition, when I started that research, I found out that my grandfather had been a beat cop during the VE Day riots, and so that for me was like a bit of a
Oh,
cosmic.
wow. Oh, that would, ooh.
Yeah, that was a bit
Mhm.
of a cosmic signal like, "Oh, you're onto something, just keep digging at
Yeah.
it." And so my mom had all these files that my grandfather had kept that were, just like clippings from the riots and things like that, because he was very early on in his career.
Mhm.
And so he had kept things. And so I also had that little bit of that little piece of family history connected to it, which to me felt like I'm supposed to keep pursuing
I
this
have to write
story. Do you know
this.
what I mean?
Yeah, and there's
Yeah.
quite a steamy romance, that woven throughout the story with the main character, and it's really
Mm.
quite interesting that, you think about the time that the story is set in, and the things that are going on behind the scenes that, people go, "Ooh," right? Those are my favorite parts.
Oh, thank you. I would like I don't think it's a romance, but I definitely like I always say it's a historical fiction with romantic elements, because
Mhm,
the story is really about this woman who is learning who she is, as a result of the war, and how it's sort of how she's grown and
mhm,
changed as a result of the opportunities given to her by the war.
mhm,
And then obviously part of that is sort of meeting someone. She meets someone unexpected. She's engaged otherwise, but he is fighting overseas, and she kind of falls for this unexpected person that she meets. And part of that discovery too is like she's quite young. She's only 19 or 20. She's discovering her own sexuality as part of growing up and growing independent. And yeah, and I think, to be honest with you, like, I obviously love all of the Halifax historical background, but Polly for me is the heart of the story, and her journey, and her the way she changes and grows and sort of like
mhm,
creates boundaries for herself. I'm really
mhm.
interested in female characters, strong female characters who sort of like butt up against the status quo of the time period, because I think
My
those women
favorite.
existed. I think they always existed.
Yep.
I think that we've silenced their stories a lot of the time because
Mhm.
they weren't the majority. And so one of the things with my first set of beta readers, one of the questions I asked them is, do you believe a woman like Polly could exist during this time period? And resounding response was like, yes, yes, women like this had to
Absolutely.
exist, because that's
Yep.
how change happens, right? Change
Yep. Yep.
happens when people blur the lines and step outside the
Mhm.
box and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
And so even
Well,
with my go
and
ahead.
like you said, it was based on a true story, and, the women that stepped up and, and went to work at the shipyards because men
Yeah.
were all off to war. But the sad part is when they came back. So here are these women who have, gained, and the men come back from war, and they have to go back to the home. But
Mhm.
Polly wasn't going to have that happen to her, right?
Yeah, I mean, originally this was called Polly's War, to be honest.
Right. Okay.
Um, and then when we started to move into production, there was, believe it or not, many other books called Polly's War. And for me, the
Oh,
title
wow.
Polly's War was really about that. Obviously, it's her experience of the Second World War as a Haligonian living and working in Halifax, but also
Mhm.
that internal struggle that she was experiencing, like that she doesn't want to do what everyone expects her to do.
Mhm.
She wants to do something else, but there doesn't seem to be a path for that. So Polly's like a person who has to create her own path, right?
Mhm.
And I just, like I said earlier, I find I read a lot of stories like that. Um, I'm interested in women who, um, you know, what is that saying? There's a really great saying about like history is I'm probably not remembering it correctly, like history is not made by well-behaved women, something like that. There's a phrase, there's a quote. If anybody is out there and they can like Google it really quick and share it with us, that'd be awesome. But
That's right.
basically,
That behind every famous man is like a strong woman or something like that.
there's one about like history is rarely made by well-behaved women, something like that.
Oh, I love
And
that. Yeah. And it's funny
something,
because, what I write women's fiction slash mystery, right?
yep, yep.
And the central characters are always is a woman who, sort of takes a stand or whatever. So I'm hoping to do more writing, but since I became a publisher, I haven't done much of that. I want to give a shout out to Sarah Butland, who has joined us. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
And Sarah says, "This is such a great book by an awesome person." And Lana says, well-behaved women rarely make history. So thank you
That's it,
for
Lana.
clarifying
Thank
that,
you.
Lana. Yay.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
it,
and
exactly.
Sarah says it was Marilyn Monroe who said that.
Who said
So
that?
thank you
Oh,
guys.
amazing. That I didn't
Appreciate.
know.
So this might be a good point, and I'm hopefully we don't freeze too much for you to do a little reading if you wouldn't
Sure.
mind. Oh,
Actually, you've set me up. I'm just going to
what do you
lean out
think?
of frame for a second, grab my book. You've set me up really nicely for the section
Okay.
I'm going to read,
Oh, good.
which, yeah, that was just happenstance, not planned at all. I'm reading from chapter 3, which is fairly early on. It's May 7th, 1945. So it's the morning of, the VE riots are going to start later that day. But of course, Polly doesn't know that yet. And earlier in this chapter, she's basically like making her way to work. She's making her way down to the shipyards where she is a welder, and I guess we'll go from there.
Perfect.
As predicted later that morning, she found herself wedged into the tiny in-between spaces on the minesweeper called the Eskimo. 2 weeks earlier, the ship had been torpedoed just outside the Halifax harbor off the shores of Sambro Head. It was a haunting reminder that the war had moved closer to Canadian soil. In fact, desperate battles were taking place in the waters off of Nova Scotia. Despite naval secrecy and a media blackout, shipping convoys would leave Halifax only to find themselves surrounded by German U-boats less than halfway across the Atlantic. She felt terrible guilt for the smile that sat upon her face. The good part of her wanted the war to end. She knew that was the right thing to pray for. But there was another part of her that was thankful. Now I know who I am, she thought. And without the war, without Thomas's departure, without her own family's desperate need for another income, well, none of this would have happened. Bang, bang, bang! She could hear one of the others slamming a fist on the outer hull of the vessel. Must be break time, she thought. Her mouth watered at the thought of the thermos of tea and buttered biscuits she had waiting in her bag. She began the tricky exercise of sliding herself and her equipment out, rear end first, into the main belly of the ship. When she emerged, several men were dancing. What's going on? She asked one of the other welders, another young woman named Dorothy. She shrugged sadly. Word just came from Ottawa. The war is officially over. Her face showed not a trace of happiness, and neither did Polly's. Bruce, one of the shift supervisors, made his way over. Great news, huh, girls? Polly nodded unenthusiastically. She knew she should be happy, certainly for the men who surrounded her, but she looked at the handful of women, emerging like mice from the various holes in the ship. Some had been housewives, teachers, receptionists, shop girls, and waitresses. Now they were shipbuilders, doing their part for the war effort, as good as any man. She simply couldn't find the joy required. She swallowed back the tears, but suddenly a small sob escaped her lips. Oh no, she blinked hard, willing the tears to stay inside. I feel like crying too. Bruce pulled a clean hanky from his pocket. Here, Polly, let it out. Cry all the tears you want to. It's a beautiful day. She took the hanky, realizing she would cry. She would break down right here in front of everyone, and they would think she was happy. We few, Bruce called out, unintentionally gathering the men. We happy few, we band of brothers. The men drifted away, out of the ship and into the yard. Several of the other women made their way to her, and together they formed a small circle. We happy few, Polly sneered. Those of us happily living for the war instead of its end. They were all in tears now, their arms wrapped around one another, an impenetrable circle. The men had wandered out to discover what would happen next, but the women stayed. They stayed in the belly of that great ship, also wondering what would happen next. What would happen to them? That's probably a good spot to stop.
Oh my goodness. Well, you really did pick a good excerpt to read. Really enjoyed that. And this, I have to be honest, this is a book that I would read more than once.
Thanks, Anne.
It's absolutely the truth. There are so many layers, and I feel like there's parts that I wanted to sort of sit and and sort of contemplate for a little bit longer kind of thing. But as the TBR pile gets bigger
I
and
feel that.
bigger,
Mhm. Mhm.
so
I feel
yeah,
that.
it's a wonderful book.
Oh, thanks, Sam.
Let's shift gears just a little bit and talk about your publisher hat.
Sure.
We we have so much in common. Not only are we both authors and publishers, but we have we have a theater background. Although I didn't pursue it as a career as you did, but it's one of those things that we were chatting about. Of our past experience really does lend itself quite nicely to the publishing industry, which kind of is a
Mhm.
beast to get to know.
Mhm.
I love it. And talk a little bit. You had mentioned you and your editor kind of came to sort of a realization that it might be fun to start a publishing company. So okay, so how are you feeling now, and where are you at as far as the evolution?
I mean, Black Box isn't even a year old. We just signed our first author who's not me, so we're working with Nicole Bazanson. And,
Yay! We
yay!
love Nicole. Oh my God, Nicole's a paradise writer.
And so we're gonna publish Nicole's book, currently called Thank You for Loving Me. We're really excited about that. We're
Awesome.
probably only gonna do, this is our first year. Our goal this year is to do 2 or 3 titles.
Mhm.
And then because I think probably even technically speaking, we're not even a publishing company until we have a few titles under our belt. So thank you for being generous with calling us that. But I have
You
to
say it
say,
out loud enough that it
yeah, yeah,
becomes real,
100%.
right?
I think the thing that's important. So my co-publisher is Heather Epp. And Heather Epp and I have a whole interesting history. Heather is a former student who I hired to edit my book. We were just having so much fun working together. She's an incredible editor. I mean, I cannot be clear enough about like the power of the editor that
Huge,
that works well with you as a writer, and
huge
like, you
piece.
know what I
Yeah.
mean? So that finding Heather as an editor was just an amazing happenstance, and then us having so much fun working together was just sort of, we just decided, we didn't want to stop. So yeah,
And
and what we've
Nicole is a past student as well, right?
and
Like,
this was an accident. Like, I'm not
I
we're not
know. How
we're
fun is
not gonna
that?
we're not gonna just be like, working with all the people that I that I used to know, right, when they were students. But Nicole, we looked at Nicole's stuff, and then I met Nicole in person for a cup of coffee, and when I looked at her, I thought, I know this person. And so we were talking for a
Looks
few minutes before
familiar.
I even realized Nicole was a former student. And so we had already expressed interest in her manuscript at that point. But the thing we're focused on at Black Box is we are focused on women's fiction, and really looking at like all the different kinds of storytelling that women are doing here on the East Coast. Because I would say, like, one of my struggles was getting someone to see it's not that there's not a lot of women working in publishing. There is.
Mhm.
I think though sometimes women are working in publishing in a way like traditionally publishing was created and built in a particular way, where there were like men were publishers, men were writers, men were editors. And sometimes I think there's structures that were historically created that maybe we can alter
Mhm.
those structures a little bit. And so what Heather and I are trying to do is to create a really safe space for women to write and publish and work together, and just acknowledging that that space might look and feel and sound different than a traditional publishing space. So
Yeah.
we're really interested in building relationships with the writers that we work with. We're interested in like we're trying to like develop workshops where we can work with local writers to build
Mhm.
relationships in that way, so that it's quite frightening. I found, from an author's perspective, it's quite frightening that first time when you have like created this thing, this baby, and then to just send it off to someone. And if I had known someone if I had had a relationship where I could converse about things and talk about things, I think it would have made the whole process a little friendlier. And I think, so I think that's sort of in a nutshell what Heather and I are trying to do: create a safe space for women and those who identify as female and queer writers to like have a little corner in the publishing industry here on the East Coast where they can enter into relationship and conversation about their work. Having said that, we do still have like a traditional submission process. Our submissions are currently open from now until the end of January, and we have no idea what volume we're going to get. Like maybe in the future we're going to only have to open up for a month, but we have already like 6 to 8 submissions that have come in just since we opened up on November 1st. And what I think is interesting is the kinds of work that is coming in. I want to be like careful with my word choice here, but I found like the thing about We Happy Few was I sent it out prior to working with Heather. I sent it out in a variety of directions, and I never got any feedback about that the writing needed work. I generally got a lot of positive response to the writing, but people didn't know what to do with it, how to market it, what genre is it, who's the reader. And I kept saying, it's women's fiction. Well, it's a romance. And no, I don't feel it is a romance. I feel it's a historical fiction with romantic elements. Who's going to read this? Women are going to read this. Men who might be interested in the historical I've had lots of male readers at this point who have said that they've enjoyed it. So that surprises me, to be honest. I wasn't writing for men, but yeah, so that's kind of what that's kind of this sort of like little corner, I think, that we're trying to shine a light on and create a space where it feels just a little friendlier. Even here's a small thing I said to Heather. So basically my role is acquisitions editor, and yeah, essentially, right? And then the thing is, with just the two of us, we're basically like, I run a lot of the social media, Heather handles contracts, but basically I'm sort of filtering things, and I'll say, Heather, like, I think this is a good fit for us, or Heather, I'm really interested in this person. And like Nicole, for example, didn't come through submissions. I sort of was like following Nicole and like
You
following her
courted
journey.
her, yeah.
I didn't
And
know
she's
Heather was a former
amazing.
student. Yeah. And
Right.
I had looked at a couple of her things, and I thought, I wonder what she's working on. And so that little piece of like creating relationships with people
Huge.
is really, to me, like, it's so fun. I
Oh,
enjoy
it's
it. I
amazing.
enjoy connecting with people, and so to have it have it turn out that we had sort of like a past where our paths crossed was just sort of like a
That's so
cherry on the
cool.
top. But
And
yeah, that's kind of what we're trying to do.
that's awesome. And there is, in my mind, a lot of opportunity to create that kind of space. And you and I have very similar approaches and mindsets to, what can be done, and sort of that mix. If there was been of the mind that if there's an approach that I can't find, well, then maybe I'll create it, right? Um,
Yes.
and Lana says, Anne and Aaron, love the stories behind your publishing goals. Two women I admire in this business. That's very, very sweet of
Oh,
you. Thank you.
thank you, Lana.
And yeah, and the
Uh,
process should be fun. Yes,
yeah,
absolutely, Lana. Right? We
that's
love your enthusiasm.
absolutely. And that's the other thing, was a piece for me. Like, I got to work on my cover design, and I said to Heather, we have to give authors the opportunity to be part of that process, to learn. Like, learning about the
Mhm.
publishing process was so much fun for me. And I don't know that it is for all authors, but I had a great time. I loved it. I didn't know that that was going to be the case, but I loved, from the time we went into production to the time I held
Yep.
this like three-dimensional thing that I had created in my hands, was so fun and so interesting, right? And I even love the marketing. I loved, thinking about ways to talk about the book and connect with others. And
Yep.
so, it's all been really fun.
And you know what? And that you have to love it, because there are so many ups and downs,
Hmm.
and roadblocks and brick walls, and so just to keep that momentum going is really, really key. And to surround yourself with other writers and other people who
Mm.
love the process
And
and love
and
the business, because it can become a bit of a love-hate relationship. And I'll never forget. I had the same feeling when I finished writing my first book, which was actually a nonfiction, and it was traditionally published. I was living in Dubai at the time. It was published by Summertime Publishing in the UK. But I
Mm,
remember thinking, "Ooh, I really love this process. I like the, watching it come together. I like doing the research. I love, I'm not much of an outliner when it comes to writing fiction, but nonfiction, I outlined, you know, had, lots of notes and things. Fiction, I'm more of a pantser. But I knew in that moment, and I had collaborated with the publisher to do workshops. And so I did sort of the upfront PR marketing, putting butts in seats, and then she did the workshops. But I thought, I could do that. So I started doing the Paradise Writers Retreat. But it really is, it's something that really gets into your blood,
mm,
and and I've always said that, I OC Publishing will exist in one form or another no matter what. And I have so many books that I want to write. So
mm.
finding that balance, and we talked about that a little bit, is wearing those two hats. And what I've discovered about myself is that because I have so many commitments and so many contracts, I published 7 titles this year. Will be the, and it that was, and of course I don't even have a minute really to think about my own writing. And
Yeah.
I'm the type that when I'm working on a novel, I have to be totally immersed in it. And I'm also the type that if I make commitments, I have to see them through. And I
Yeah.
adore my authors. And one of them is watching. I adore you, Cindy. um, so it's really, but it is an amazing industry. There's a lot of moving parts, and I always say it's a steep climb until you're like upside down, trying
Yeah.
to figure out where to
I've
go.
also found it to be, like, incredibly warm and welcoming, like, the, maybe not so much the publishing piece, I'm not sure about that yet, we're still fairly green, I think, but the author community, the writing community in Nova Scotia has been so kind, and, like, I include, for example, like, when I say the author community, I include people like Sue Slade, right? Sue Slade is
Of
such a
course.
champion for local authors, there's all these people out there that are
We love
just
you, Sue.
yay! That, like, just embrace local authors and
Yep.
wanna give them all the, like, sort of opportunities and that, that they can, and,
And
every
support
time
and
I connect with a
exposure.
w yeah, exactly, and every time I connect with another author, I come away so excited and so inspired because, I don't know, I think there's something when, like, creative energies bump up against
Yeah.
each other,
Yeah.
it's like contagious excitement, and then I leave with, like, a million more ideas, and I wanna sit down and, get writing, and so I
Which
think
is
it's great when
scary. Like, you don't need any more ideas, right?
no, exactly, exactly.
But collaboration is amazing. And I
Yeah.
love the new, the Dart Speak that has started up at the Dartmouth Art Gallery, the Dart
Yeah, through
Gallery
Lindsay
on Putnam
Harrington
Street.
and then through the
Lindsay,
yeah,
amazing. What an amazing
yeah.
group of writers that is. And I had so much fun. I think there's another one coming up. But hard to believe we're just about at a time, Aaron. That's just,
I
we
think
could
you
just
and I
go on
could
and
just sit
on.
and talk forever.
Yes, we definitely could. You'll have to come back because you've got
I'd
so
love
much going
to.
on.
I'd
Yeah. Do
love
you have
to.
any last thoughts to share before we wrap up?
Ooh. Um I mean, I would love for people just to keep an eye on what Black Box Publishing is doing.
Mhm.
We definitely will have a couple of other books coming out this year, and like I said, be when we're looking to create space for female writers, female identifying writers, queer writers, that feels a little safer, a little more
Mhm.
comfortable. And so please keep an eye on us and um I think our website's been sort of
Yep.
scrolling across
Yep.
the bottom there. It's a
Let's
good
bring it up
place.
again. And
Yeah, it's a
also, people can follow on your social. So can they find your social through
yeah, I mean,
blackboxpublishinghouse.ca?
everything's connected, right? So, but if you we're on Black Box is on Instagram as well and
Mhm.
Facebook.
Okay.
And then I'm on Instagram as well as Twitter and I have Facebook as well. So and
Okay.
then you can also be keeping an eye on Heather because Heather does lots of cool stuff as well. Heather Epp, she's on
Okay.
Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and all that. But I think all that's linked. If you go to Black Box, you'll
Yeah.
find all those things linked. So Thanks so much,
Okay.
Anne, for the opportunity to chit chat and talk
Oh my
books and
goodness. I'm
publishing.
looking down the comments to trying to make sure that I shared all of the thoughts people were having. And Sue Slade says, I love the cover of We Happy Few. That is a beautiful cover. And actually, just before you
Oh, thank
go,
you.
who did your cover?
Uh, a former student, Ryan Oxner, did my cover. He's a graphic designer. And the other thing is like
Awesome.
I have all these people out in the world doing the most amazing things, and if my work can support their work, I'm super interested in that. So Ryan is a former student who is a graphic designer, and I reached out and said like, have you ever done a book cover? Would you be interested? And so we got to work together on that. Obviously, there's going to be like all kinds of other people we employ. Not every person who worked on my book was a former student, but I really love being able to, if I have a former student who does great work
Mm-hmm.
in an area that I'm working in, I try to throw as much work
Mm-hmm.
their way as I can,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a way as their former teacher to still support what they're doing and stay connected. So I love doing that. Yeah,
I think that's amazing. And I will definitely be in touch if I'm looking for creatives. I'm working on building, as you do, like a
yeah,
collection of
yeah.
editors, designers, artists, illustrators. And, it's one of my favorite things to do. It can get a bit daunting at times, but no, it's a wonderful industry to be in. And Aaron, welcome to the publishing world.
Thank you.
And congratulations on We Happy Few. I'm
Oh,
very
thanks
excited.
so
And I do have a signed
much.
copy, and I picked this one up at Dartmouth Book
I'm
Exchange.
sure
Thank
you
you,
did. I
Sue,
could tell by
for
the
your
sticker
support.
that
So
that
Aaron,
was a
please
Dartmouth
do,
Book Exchange.
yeah, please do come back
Would love
and
to.
do another author journey. And for now, thank you ever so much.
My
And
pleasure.
And thank you for watching. I'm sorry that there were some technical issues. Hopefully, we came across okay. And we will get Erin back to share more of her publishing and author journey story with us. Excited to see her next book that comes out. But for now, we'll say goodbye and we'll see you next week, not work. I have to go back to work. I've got so much to do. Next week on the author journey. Now, have a wonderful afternoon and we'll see you soon. Bye for now.